The Wrath of the Druids DLC is going to be the first big DLC for Assassin's Creed Valhalla in its season pass. Now, I've already made a video discussing the Siege of Paris DLC and what I expect to come from that, but today I want to go over the Wrath of the Druids. This one, again, it's pretty much speculation, but it's based off of what we've seen from DLCs previously, especially in this form of Assassin's Creed, as well as things like history and just the people involved in this particular time period. Now, remember, before we start the video, I hope you guys are enjoying the Yule Festival in game. Be sure to give each other the fabulous gift of nice, thick, and juicy likes on the video. It's just a fantastic thing to do, not only for me, but for all of your friends and loved ones. And also, if you do enjoy this kind of content, I mean, hey, you know, I mean, it's pretty darn good in my humble opinion, then make sure you hit that big red sexy subscribe button right underneath the video. And also, I gotta shout out my channel members. You guys help make these videos possible. Thank you very much. If you guys want to join and become a part of this dank community, then check out the link in the description down below for exclusive perks. Anyway, let's start the video. So I do want to interject one last time before we actually get into the Wrath of the Druids. This is mostly because I'm a part-time YouTuber and I just didn't have the time to make this a whole complete video, but I wanted to give my quick thoughts on the auto level scaling as well as the XP boosters that were implemented into the game. So essentially, if you're not aware, the guys over at Ubisoft decided to make everything level scaled in the games to where once you get 51 power level or more above the enemies in a particular area, they level scale all the way up to that 51 power level below you, and then all bosses are going to be equal or greater to you. Now, this is okay as most RPG games have a level scaling option that you can turn on or off, talking games like The Witcher 3 and even Assassin's Creed Origins, a game previously in the series. But Assassin's Creed Odyssey did this similar blanket kind of change to the level system and the balancing of the game, and it was met with a ton of pushback, and it was a big criticism of that game because all it does is artificially extend the game. There's really no point to the leveling system once you do that, just because everyone is going to level up with you, so why does it matter? Now, of course, some people enjoy playing this way, but for some people, they wanted to save things in particular areas in order to go back and return to them, like certain zealots or legendary creatures and other boss fights in those kinds of places, and there's good reason to that. I'm sure a lot of players wanted to do that, but now they don't have that option, and it's as simple as just adding this as a toggle, something you can turn on or off. It doesn't need to be a mandatory blanket change, and this could just be a minor criticism, but they just had to add those XP boosters in as well. And again, XP booster and mandatory level scaling was a thing they did in Odyssey, and it was not met very well just because Odyssey was so grindy, you almost had to get an XP booster. Now in this game, you level up every 2 seconds. Like, it's not an issue. I don't think many people are going to feel the need to buy an XP booster that have already been playing the game, but we are about to get that holiday influx of players, and people who just aren't aware might see that daunting skill tree and be like, what is that? Like, why? I need to get this XP booster. There's a lot of levels to go up here. And I think that might trick a few new players into buying something that they really don't need. And, you know, if you feel like you need an XP booster to level up faster, that's up to you. That's your decision. It's your money. But I do think that this is a scummy move that Ubisoft is doing in order to take advantage of people who just, they're simply not aware of what is going on with these games, and they're new players, especially over the holidays. They're typically your more casual players who aren't following along and watching YouTube videos about stuff like that. They're simply just buying the game and jumping into it. So if you are one of those people, you don't need to buy XP packs. I'm telling you now, this is something you do not need. I've gone through the game just fine without it. It's not like Odyssey where it's grindy. If you are someone who already has the game, then you know it's pretty easy to level up. I mean, pretty much anything you do gives you 2 skill points, so it's not a huge deal to get those skill points. So anyway, that was my little rant on those two things coming into the game at the same time and why it's implemented in a scummy way, which of course is a month after release, after all the reviews have come out, except for mine, of course. Don't you worry. Once, if I ever finish this game, once I get it finished, there will be a pretty solid review on it, so it's another reason to subscribe. I'm just saying, it's gonna be a pretty dank video. Anyway, let's talk about the Wrath of the Druids and what this DLC is gonna be all about. So the Wrath of the Druids should probably encompass, you guessed it, the Druids in Ireland. And I think this is actually going to be a pretty interesting DLC. I'm typically not all that interested in the mythical side of things in terms of like the mythical boss fights in this game, like the Daughters of Lyrion and things like that. Now I will warn, this will have minor spoilers for the Gloucestershire arc, which honestly it's not all that mind-blowing of an arc, so if you haven't completed it and you want to avoid spoilers, then just don't look at the screen or come back later once you have completed it. But other than that, we're gonna get right on into this. So the Druids. The Druids historically are a fairly misunderstood people. We really just don't know a ton about them in terms of what their actual beliefs were or what kind of exact practices they did. We do know a little bit from a lot of Roman sources or people who were really enemies of them, and in a similar kind of way to the Vikings, their perspective isn't totally shared in the historical record, and they're often portrayed as these mystical villains who even Julius Caesar saw as people who were kind of crazy and had these insane practices and were very much villainized throughout history. And I think that could offer a very interesting relationship in the DLC between the Vikings who are in Dublin, as Dublin was one of the first permanent Viking settlements in the British Isles, and the Druids themselves, who are of course already established in that area, especially through most of Northern Europe in general. And I think it could offer for a very interesting storyline in the DLC, not only because of the Druid and Viking relationship, but also because of the metaphor of the Isu-human relationship and the Druid and, I guess, outsider relationship, you could really say, just because so many people really misunderstood what exactly they were. From what we can really gather and kind of presume about them, their knowledge was based a lot on science and the environment, but they kind of made it in a divine fashion. And that's where I think the storyline could get really interesting, because it could be very much a metaphor for, like I said, that Isu-human relationship. And I do think a piece of Eden will be involved. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that has to do with drug trips and things like kind of like what Valka can do and have you see different realms, or even boss fights like with the Daughters of Lyrion. I think it could be very similar to that, and it could make for some very interesting and visually stunning moments within the game. But I think the ultimate thing in this particular series that can mess with your mind is of course an Apple of Eden, and I think that could absolutely come into play in this game, especially with the Druids who seem to have this really ancient knowledge. And if they were able to gain maybe some knowledge from a piece of Eden, maybe one of the original Druids was someone who had enough Isu DNA to be able to access the knowledge within that piece of Eden, and he slowly passed down that knowledge, and it kind of got corrupted, of course, by mankind and turned into this deified kind of fashion, just like the Isu are in general, seen as gods in various religions around the world. I think that that could make for a very interesting storyline in this DLC. Now, do I think it'll be that deep for something as simple as a DLC? I don't know. Things like the Hidden Ones DLC were pretty short, but I did really enjoy that particular DLC, so we'll have to see on that front. But as far as the gameplay goes and what to expect, I think there may be some areas of city gameplay with social stealth and everything like that in Dublin, but I think that'll probably be a pretty small part. I think for the most part, it's going to be a lot of boss fights and exploring, drug trips, caves, things to find throughout the world, a lot of your more open world gameplay that we see in a majority of Valhalla. And while I'm not against the exploration, I do really enjoy exploring in Valhalla. I'm not a huge fan of the combat, so seeing that we're likely to have a bunch of different boss fights, I would imagine, is not going to be my cup of tea, and I doubt a lot of other players' cup of tea, just because the combat does need a lot of work. It doesn't feel right a lot of the time. I'm just not a fan of it. But I do think regardless of that, even though it probably won't be a perfect DLC, I think the storyline has a ton of potential, and that really is what is going to be holding my interest more so than anything else. I think they have handled mythology in a lot better sense in terms of lore in this game, and I think there will be a scientific explanation to what the Druids have in that DLC. I don't think it's going to be actual magic or anything crazy like we saw in Odyssey. I think it'll be something based in the real world, and I think it'll kind of bring back those Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 kind of vibes in regards to what that magic, quote unquote, is in this DLC. And I'm really excited to see that, despite the likelihood of seeing some weird drug trips and boss fights and things like that. Overall, though, I am a bit more excited for the Siege of Paris just because of what I talked about in that video. Again, if you haven't seen it, I'll link it on a card. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the Wrath of the Druids DLC down below. What do you think will be coming to this DLC? Which one are you more excited for, the Wrath of the Druids or the Siege of Paris? Let me know. Let's have a conversation, and I will see you guys in the next video.